Hi, and welcome back. I'm Nick Cassiotti, your host. Today, we have three exciting topics, and our guests are going to respond to them right now. Our first topic of the day, Eric, we are now seeing a massive disparity between states with their COVID response. Florida is reporting its highest case count since July, while Iowa is resuming normal operation of bars and restaurants. To a non party affiliated voter like myself, why does one country have such a widely different angle on rules and regulations, but very similar results based upon the data?
As a country, we've got a lot of things that we do that in general that other countries have figured out responses to. Now let's be clear too. I think that it's important context to say that we by far as a country have the worst issue with COVID that any country has. I believe I heard that New Zealand just lifted all restrictions. They were able to do that largely because they have been giving checks. I've been hearing something like an equivalent of about $19,000 has gone to citizens of other countries, like Canada, for example, over the course of the pandemic for people to stay home. And the United States, doesn't matter if you're talking about one jurisdiction versus another, we haven't done that. We've given one $1,200 check, and we're arguing about whether or not we should give a $600 check to average citizens in the United States.
Sure. So to pull out of you a little bit more, right? So from the audience, they want the substance, the meat and potatoes of your position on this. So if you're trying to sway me as a non-party affiliated person, and you're saying, hey, the progressive or the Democrats have the better way of managing this, we're seeing very wide differentiations between states like California and Iowa and Florida, right? So how are we seeing all these regulations in these different areas coming to the same result? That's the big question, right? So we're seeing an uptick in cases everywhere. Everyone's
Right.
wearing masks.
Right.
Social distancing is everywhere, but we're seeing an equal amount of cases, right? So
Yeah.
from that standpoint, are the regulations making sense?
Well, the thing is that those regulations don't get to the meat of the issue, right? It doesn't matter if it's a Republican or a Democratic district. You don't have any of those areas giving people money to stay home. You don't have any of those areas. I mean, like I live here in California. They have an eviction moratorium, but I've been to multiple eviction defenses where people are getting evicted from their homes despite the eviction moratorium, and people are losing in court, even though the precedent is, you're not allowed to evict people.
So in Florida, we're seeing a very different angle between California and Florida. Iowa is reopening their bars. So is that telling us that the regulations are working? They're not working? Can you speak on that?
Well, I think if you look at the differences in the performances between the states, Florida is performing right now better than a lot of the heavy lockdown states. A virus is going to virus, right? What we're seeing is that you can put the most stringent lockdown policies, unless you're an island like New Zealand that completely isolate itself off. That's a different scenario there. But we're seeing on a state-by-state basis, the difference isn't really the way the government policy affects the virus itself, but rather than the consequences of the government policies on the economies of these states. And to me, the more important number right now, if you're going to compare Florida's performance in the virus against places like California, New York, et cetera, is that we've seen unemployment rate in Florida drop significantly, while you're seeing continued increases in jobs being destroyed in these blue Democrat-run states. And I think that's the thing that really matters. South Dakota, I think their unemployment rate now is about the same as it was a year ago, which is incredible. And I think that we can't ignore the economic cost of these policies, because the virus is going to do what it's going to do. In America, really, our performance on the virus is not that different than really a lot of these states. We're just a much larger country than most of them. We also have a lot better reported data. I mean, if you were going to trust China's reporting of their data, I mean, I don't think history will look well upon that. It's the consequences are more about the economic side of it when you look at these state-to-state basis, rather than, again, how we're going to contain this virus. And luckily, we'll see how the vaccine, that rollout is going to change things, I think, going forward. But I think that we can't overlook the economic consequences of this.
Sure. So, Joe, as a Green Party member, we're seeing blue versus red. We're seeing if this state does this state is going to do the opposite and do that. I mean, is this the opportunity that the Green Party has been looking for to gain votes from all angles?
Well, every third party stands to gain an awful lot from this because of the disconnect between the red and the blue states. despite everything that's going on, red states still have blue districts, blue states still have red districts. And it continues to create a conflict in the way of the movement, in the way of freedom of action. And part of the problem is whether it's red or blue, the health districts all across the United States are still using bogus information to base their policies on. They're not responding appropriately as far as mask mandate. Okay, I shouldn't say that. Reason why is because I don't think the masks function quite the way everybody thinks they should. We oversimplified the problem, making our solution, well, we oversimplified the solution too. Thinking the mask solves the problem was the wrong idea. You need to know how to properly use it. 90% of America doesn't properly use their masks. And this is a problem, blue or red, doesn't matter. They continue to put out this oversimplified solution to an oversimplified problem without making sure that people understand the complexities of what's going on. The lockdowns are problematic because people just pick up and they go shopping where there isn't a lockdown. Every place where there's a major blue district, a major city, when they put in the lockdowns, everybody just drives across county lines to the next health district. That spreads the disease. So you continue to see blue areas infecting red areas. And then you got areas where there's massive economic booms right now because of the COVID crisis. You still have people working in North Dakota on the oil fields, okay? They still go home on the weekends. They come back to work on Monday. You know, whatever their cycle is, whatever their routine. So you still have people traveling all across the United States, all times.
Sure. Eric, how do you respond as a progressive Democrat to what Joe is saying as a Green Party member, potentially getting a lot of votes out of this mismanagement and mishandling?
I mean, votes in terms of for the progressives, you're saying?
Well, we're looking at now that these third parties are getting more votes than ever before. So I think that the media right now is perpetuating COVID as a red versus blue issue, right? Is going back to the meat and potatoes of the argument. It looks like if one state's going to go drastic in one area, right, where we're seeing LA adding additional lockdowns, Florida is wide open, right? So how can one nation manage this crisis in two separate ways?
Well, I mean, that's the nature of the United States. I mean, we have states largely by that nature get a chance to implement policy however they want. And that's largely been the Trump administration's tack going into this. Again, I think that for me, the policies that have been implemented to address this on a national level haven't done anything to help people economically, which is the crux of why people are going out and people are having to work. For example, the Tyson meat packing plant saw a huge issue with people dying from COVID as a result, forcing people to essentially have to continue to work. And again, not giving people the money. Canada was giving people $2,000 a month through the extent of the pandemic, and they didn't see nearly the uptick. I mean, we've had 3 waves. Most other countries have only had 2. We're seeing way more issues, and I take issue with the idea that Florida isn't having issues. Florida right now is actually having bigger issues with the pandemic than most states. I know that California, the state I live in, is one state that is having a huge issue right now as well. Again, it's population centers. The problem is complex. You can't just say, hey, it's one factor here, but definitely, I think at the end of the day, the reason that the United States in general and why both parties have not addressed this at all adequately is the fact that, again, they haven't done anything to help people on the ground in a substantive way so that they don't have to go to the work, so that they don't have to encounter people on a daily basis who may have COVID.
So helping people on a day-to-day basis, is that by handing them checks or allowing them to go back to work under a pandemic?
Well, I think it's in some cases a little bit of both, because one of the issues is that, I mean, these state governments that shut down these businesses, they should be liable to the economic consequences that they placed upon business owners. and workers, the workers that have been screwed over as well. And the problem is that and this has been a bipartisan problem that's gone on for a very long time, is that the people that have done the best economically during 2020 are corporate powers, right? Because the Fed's been subsidizing. When the Fed starts acting in extravagant ways, it's always the financial sector that ends up being the biggest benefactors. Again, big business benefits, small business suffers. Again, this is exactly why I think, again, Florida, I'm happy to compare Florida's hospitalization rate, their death rate. Anytime people are focusing on cases as a measurement of coronavirus, cases, you only measure the cases that are tested. There's a self-selecting bias there. Cases are the phony measure. Hospitalizations and deaths are a far better measure. Florida's been much better than blue states on both of those measurements right now. But again, what we haven't done is destroyed the working class in our state. For example, I live in Bay County, Florida. We're a heavy tourism industry area. I think the county actually most relied upon tourism. I've got a lot of friends that are servers. They've been able to work. They've been able to make a lot more money the fact that we haven't shut down our economy than they would even with a $1,000, $1,200 a month check. I mean, that means a lot more to them than simply giving out money. Now, I do think that there are fair criticisms out there where, again, those in power are getting bailed out, rather than doing some of these direct payments. You're now seeing some very interesting coalitions with like Bernie Sanders working with Josh Hawley to try to force a vote on this. Looks like they're not going to have like $600 compromising. And the issue I have with the idea that, oh, we'll just send out checks to everyone is that checks don't produce goods, right? You have to have workers, you have to have a functioning economy, because ultimately that money is meant to buy goods and services, right? So if we do not have that the production taking place, then that has problems. You can't simply print our way out of this. But it is a concern when, again, the working class gets screwed over while the corporate, big business gets bailed out. And that's unfortunately the way it works more often than not.
Yeah, so Tho and I actually agree 100% on the whole corporate bailout side of things. And I wager that that's probably all three of us. So the most recent bill that was pushed forth, it was, I mean, the thing that Josh Hawley and Bernie Sanders agreed on was basically the idea that, hey, Mitch McConnell pushing for putting this corporate, I mean, I mentioned the Tyson meatpacking plant. One of the provisions of the bill was going to basically absolve Tyson and other corporations of any liability whatsoever for literally killing people during COVID. Now, I will take issue with the idea. As someone who actually had COVID myself, I can tell you that the problems are far from limited to, and I'm, by the way, I'm a fitness instructor, I'm a weightlifting coach, and so I'm also fairly young, and so I didn't feel nearly the worst problems from COVID, but I can tell you, as someone who had it myself, that the issues with COVID, the lasting issues with COVID, don't limit themselves to those who die from it or those who are hospitalized from it. It was not anywhere near a regular flu or regular cold. I had heart palpitations that lasted well after having it, and I got lucky that I don't even know, because I haven't had cardiac tests or anything of that nature, but this thing, and there's studies that are showing there are lasting effects that occur as a result of this disease. So it's a disease that we need to take seriously. That's where we do disagree. And it's a disease that does require short-term. I think that absolutely I agree as well. Like, there are small businesses that are absolutely being hurt by a lack of stimulus from the government.
Joe, you're looking at a Republican and Democrat response to how this is being handled, managed, or mismanaged. We're looking at this on a national level, but it looks like a lot of the regulations and rules that they're putting into place are really at a local level. We're seeing mayors add in additional regulations that haven't been there before, right? We're looking at the small city types, and that's where a lot of people have major disagreements. I mean, is this the opportunity that a third party has to start small and move into those national campaigns?
That's one of the things we talk about as third parties, is taking in roles on city councils, roles as city mayor, being able to be a libertarian or a Green Party city mayor. Whether it's a large city like New York, whether it's a smaller city like Boise, Idaho, whether it's small townships in Sandpoint or Medford, Oregon. The ability to go in and actually say, got it, we need to take a scientific approach to this. We need to fix the problems, rather than this knee-jerk political reactionism that we get between red versus blue, which is literally all over the place right now. We have blue cities putting in the lockdowns because they're getting feedback from their constituents. We got red cities saying open it up. But at the end of the day, all of it's still coming down to the fact that the federal government is giving money away to the corporations in the United States. More than half of this 900 billion that they're currently contemplating is direct payments to corporations, big corporations. Almost not less than half of it has to do with supplementing and providing assistance to the people on the bottom. So going back to, I think it was Will Rogers who pointed it out, with his complaint about FDR way back when. FDR thought that the trickle down worked. Little did he know that, if you give it to the guy on the bottom, it's still going to end up in the hands of the rich guy at the end of the day, but at least the little guy will have touched it.
So I'll give you the last word.
One thing that I'm concerned about going forward with some of this relief stuff, and it looks like that might be cut out this latest bill, but it's going to be one of the big things going forward, is a lot of blue states are trying to use COVID as an excuse to try to get some bailout because many of these areas have been completely mismanaged for a very long time. I think that's going to end up, that makes that Senate issue so much bigger in Georgia because, when you start forcing red states to try to bail out blue states, the politicization of what we have right now, that's going to be something I think going forward is really going to be one of those major fault lines that can only further divide the country that, is not exactly unified by any stretch of the imagination.
Thank you to our guests that had the opportunity to come on today. This is a 3-part series. Those additional series portions will be linked right above up here. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, hit that subscribe button. If you like me as a host and our topics today, give us a thumbs up and share us on social media. We'll see you in the next one.